You're listening to Unsugarcoated with Alia, bringing you interviews with public figures and inspirational people speaking on self-improvement with empowering themes. And I'm your host, Alia Lanius. Hello to another episode of your favorite social good talk show, where today we are going to explore the power of emotional intelligence and its impact on parenting. Who here has a kid or a niece or a nephew or a mom or a dad? You know, somewhere I'm sure this will be an intriguing conversation for you. As we embark on this journey, I am reminded of the wise words once said by our guest today. The most powerful way to change the world is to raise children who have been raised with emotional intelligence. Look at that, right? And it's true. When we raise our children to be empathetic, compassionate, and emotionally resilient, we are building a better future for all of us. In a world where we face so many challenges, it's easy to feel helpless and overwhelmed. But as parents, we have a unique opportunity to make a difference. By nurturing our children's emotional intelligence, we can empower them to become agents of change, to create a world that is more equitable, more compassionate, and that's why we are so excited to be joined by a true pioneer in the field of emotional intelligence and parenting. So whether you're a parent, an educator, or simply someone who cares about the future of our world, I invite you to join us today on our journey of discovery and growth. Together, let's explore the power of emotional intelligence and the transformational impact it can have on our lives. So with that, let's get our guest on. Meet Catherine Winter-Sellery, CEO and founder of Conscious Parenting Revolution and the creator of Guidance Approach to Parenting, a program that uses conflict resolution skills to communicate more effectively with children. Her workshop, TEDx Talks, and best-selling book, 7 Strategies to Keep Your Relationship with Your Kids from Hitting the Boiling Point, have positively impacted relationships and brought healing and reconciliation in families. Join us as we dive into her methods and learn more about her journey. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Catherine Winter-Sellery.
Hi, it's so good to be here. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk about this.
I love it. I love it.
Everything. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I know you're talking to us today from Hong Kong.
Yes.
Yes. So what's the time? I'm in LA, so I know that there's quite a significant time difference.
It's tomorrow morning, so I can tell you how your whole day is going to go.
I love it. I love it. You're in the future. Amazing. Well, Catherine, first of all, let's start off with, can you tell us about your background and how you got interested in conscious parenting?
Yeah, my background was actually, I went to law school. I trained as a mediator and I was working in the business world. And then I just started having my own children. And when I started having my own children, my husband and I literally, I remember we had our first child and he was like 2 years old and he hadn't done anything horrible, but he'd done something that we knew required a parental response. And we struggled to know what and how to respond in, the word we're going to use is discipline here, but I almost hesitate to use that word because everybody associates discipline with some kind of punishment,
right?
Something that's going to happen to him in order for him to learn his lesson so that he'll become a good citizen and a thoughtful and considerate person. However, everything just felt wrong. It didn't feel right to do a timeout. It didn't feel right to do a naughty chair. It didn't feel right to do none of the things that were sort of accessible, in the general world at large that we saw were what other people were doing just didn't feel right. So we started our own parenting journey and just took trainings. And I really, honestly, it just became my passion. I just fell in love with this whole world of raising children to be considerate and conscious because I became more considerate and more conscious. And it was just my own journey in parenthood that kind of geared my whole career into a different direction.
Right. Which it matters because, when you've had a child and you do understand whether you've had them or you're a caretaker or you've inherited a child, whether regardless,
Absolutely.
you're raising a child,
yeah.
right? and I have to tell you, like, my perspective of parenting, especially as children are small, it's kind of like planting a tree, right? And when you plant the tree, you have to put a stick alongside of a tree in order for it to grow up, right? Or it will go to the side and you won't have a tree that goes up. Though I'm sure when we walk into the forest, we can see a zillion trees that did not have a stick alongside of them. But, you know, and I love what you said right there, because there's boundaries. Like, I think people's perception of parenting, especially when you say conscious parenting, it's like, oh, so you think I'm just supposed to let my kid do whatever they want? And that, you know, it's like this perception of, well, that's, you know, like, I'm curious if you were spanked or disciplined at all, only because, like, I know I was. And actually, I wasn't just spanked, to be honest. I was, you know, definitely, you know, punishment back in the 70s was abuse. Let's just be real. I mean,
it is.
Not trying to be mean, you know, and there's a part of me that would like to say, and I'm going to get to the question here. There's a part of me that would like to say I'm a better person now for it. Like, I'm tougher and stronger. But you and I shared this conversation that really conscious parenting is not about that, right? I mean, it's pulling back on the trauma, still teaching boundaries, but infusing and empowering your child more than teaching them, hey, do what I say just because I said it, right? Like, what, you know, what inspired you, and what was your upbringing like, to be honest?
Yeah. So I do remember when we had, you know, this conversation, and I think I might have said, and this is what I usually say around a question like this, is that if my parents had been more conscious, I don't think I'd be doing what I do. One of my TED Talks is actually on surviving unconscious parenting. So when we have been raised by parents who love us, and there's no doubt about the love, and I mean, I adore and loved my parents. And at the same time, I would say that there was, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Right. And the love is present and the good intentions are there, and the approaches and the lack of conscious awareness of their own projections, negative view of children, beliefs that get in the way of collaborative problem solving because they see that children have actions and behaviors which are not necessarily just developmentally appropriate or understandable or all the rest of it, but are punishable.
Right.
And you get to that negative view of children because it's so prevalent, and you get to the narrative around, you know, you're disrespecting me, or you're making me feel, or any of these kind of sentences where you're actually taking your narrative with or without the conscious awareness that you created it, blaming someone else for it, and then making them pay for how you feel, as if they caused it. I mean, everything about this is insanity. You get that, right?
Right. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, because really, I mean, it was just like, I remember getting hit on the head with you know, not sitting straight while my hair was getting brushed. And it's like, okay, the response was poof, boom. And, you know, you're going to, you know, and it's like, yeah, that, look, and I love what you said. Love is there. But I was kicked out of the house at 14 years old and left on the streets because of tough love. And
yeah, what did you do that was so diabolical, that required such extraordinary response?
I exhibited independence. I didn't, you know, I did what every teenager does. I kind of rebuffed the rules, or I buffed, you know, I gave resistance. I said, oh, I'm a teenager, and that warranted. And as I always say, they were just emotionally unintelligent to say, okay, you know, I mean, and I want to save other people from that experience with parenting, which is why I love you know, having this conversation with you on what that really means.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because if you have an autonomous child, the response is, how dare you, from an adult? How dare you exercise your autonomy needs and want to be self-directed and have an opinion or feelings and needs of your own that are different than mine? Because authoritarian parenting actually requires that you bow to me. You bow to me and you say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and just do as you are told. You become the pinnacle of obedience and compliance, and that's the objective. And my mom was from the Deep South. And so, you know, I think, and I'm sure it's not just women from the Deep South, but when I think of women from the deep South, I think of tiger moms. I think of people who just want you to do as you are told and go, and of course, there's the cotillion and there's the white gloves and there's the crossing your legs at the ankle and all of it. And you become a good citizen, you become a considerate, thoughtful person and a blah, 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 blah. And the list goes on and on. And I could say that the energy of do as you're told in the child that wants to be accepted by their parents, the child will just do it because they're not going to risk their parents, withdrawing their love or even looking disappointed because they are so tied with that parental approval. And the autonomous child is going to risk that disapproval in order to be self-directed. In order to stay connected to themselves and their own feelings and needs, in order to exert the fact that they are separated, individuated in their own person, and they get punished for it every time. Sometimes what happens is they learn to betray themselves and their inner voice in service to the other.
Right. Oh yeah. No, you collaborated it for anyone, the audience. I contribute to Aware Now, Social Cause Magazine. We did an article on teen violence and awareness, and you were lovely and contributed quotes for that and I so recognized it. I mean, look, I went through a lot of sexual abuse from different people as a child, and because I was so afraid to speak up and I did not know how to stop these things when they happened, because I was told I was a child and I was to be seen and not be heard, and to not make other people feel uncomfortable.
That's right.
So how do parents, and actually I'm going to ask you this question, but I want to bring up a point. How do parents incorporate conscious parenting into their everyday life is the question. But I also want to share, I love this quip I heard the other day, or not quip, but a social media reel that was talking about the difference between an engineer and a shepherd as a parent, right? There's parents that think my child is my do-over. They're my second chance. And they could take this approach of like, well, I'm going to make everything right, as if they're engineering, but we're not. We are shepherds as parents. We are overseeing and we're helping them grow and evolve and so forth. So, back to that question. How do parents incorporate conscious parenting into their everyday lives?
With every word that comes out of their mouth and what they model. So it's back to this sort of, if I want to help you, then I need to support myself to be more conscious so that what I can be as the model in our relationship gives you something to model your behavior off of. And that's how we stop the transgenerational repeat patterns over time of just doing exactly what was done to me to the other,
right.
Which is why when, we started our parenting journey with our little boy, that's when it really, for the first time, like I was in the moment having that experience of, oh, wow, the words that are about to come out of my mouth and the actions that I'm about to behave are going to either be the wash and repeat cycle, which is going to pass down, or it's going to change. And so I got to be the change. I was the one who broke the transgenerationally, irresponsible response. It doesn't mean that you don't respond. It's not that you're permissive. It's not that you allow inappropriate behavior, thoughtless behavior to continue, but you're connecting to the behavior, to the child, and the way you're perceiving the behaviors. That's where the consciousness comes in. That's where, if you want to parent consciously, you begin to be aware of, what do I have to believe this about you? So if as a conscious parent, you just start asking that question, what do I have to believe? I was with a mom yesterday and she was saying to me, I've been doing this little class in my child's school, and they're kind of teaching very, I'm going to just call it like a lightweight course in parenting. And I said, okay, great. And she showed me the example that they'd been working on that day. And I said, wow, look at this. It said something along the lines of, I feel you disrespect me. And I was like, wow, that isn't even a feeling. That's a thought. And that's a thought that person is saying about that child's actions, that it's disrespectful. And I think we can all agree a child isn't in the mindset of what's respectful, what's disrespectful. They might be thoughtless. They might be immature. They are definitely thoughtless and immature. I mean, that's kind of the journey, isn't it? As the parents, we're taking a young child who hasn't thought about anybody else's feelings and needs. They don't even know that anybody else is in the room, by the way, some of them, right? And so for those children, basically we're helping them develop and consider other people's feelings and needs in the room, not just their own, and the art of perspective taking and being able to wonder, like, what's going on for mom when I do this, or my siblings when I do this, or my dad or grandma or grandpa or my partner, or whatever it is. And so as children get that support to be able to take into consideration other people's experience of their actions and behaviors, they might have that aha button go off. I can be considerate of other people without even realizing that they're learning how to be considerate. So, do you teach consideration by taking negative views of children and projecting it onto them? What does it take to be a conscious parent? I need to start becoming the observer of my own thoughts and wonder about some of the wild things that I think without becoming fused as though I think I am my thoughts or I think I am my feelings. Like we started with emotional resilience and what is, required to become emotionally resilient. Well, for starters, we have emotions, but we're not emotions. So the emotions flow through us, but we're not identified with them.
Right.
And I mean,
they pass
if
too.
We can start to live where we're surfing the wave of the emotions without becoming identified with our feelings or acting out from our feelings, then our children have an example. They have that stick in the forest that's holding up the tree. Mm-hmm. Love that example. So they have someone who is living a centered, energetic field, who knows how to stay centered in the sense of self that's bigger than what's bugging them, so that they're not fused, merged, overcome by their feelings, but have the feelings fully, are present to the feelings, but not acting out of them.
Right.
I mean, that's another like cornerstone in conscious parenting, is just to stop blaming anyone for how you feel. You make me feel. And then sometimes it's that whole statement. Mm-hmm. And people give a thought, which is their own mind projecting someone onto someone else, their thoughts, and then making that person responsible for their thoughts and then the feeling. It's insanity. It's also, I think, the cornerstone of gaslighting. So this is where I guess I lift the conversation and say, well, it's not just about how we're communicating with our kids, because again, it's a lot about how we communicate, period.
Right.
And whether we're consciously aware of the things we're projecting onto other people or the ways in which we're not being accountable for what we're feeling and what we're needing and how we're communicating what we're feeling and what we're needing. And if we're blaming our feelings on other people, that example is being passed down, and children then become unaccountable for their behaviors. And we wonder why they're unaccountable for their behaviors.
First of all, I mean, the conflict resolution in itself, it is both parties saying, I feel this way, but we want to move past this, right? When you look at generational child abuse, there's a very important thing people need to understand. Your kids will not grow up to do what you say. They will grow up to do what you did, right? Mm-hmm. And in order to break that cycle, understanding what gaslighting is, understanding that, your kids are not always responsible for your feelings, even though it's okay to have them, but it's still our job to work through and teach them and explain or help create a better environment to shift what is happening, instead of just saying, you're making me angry, right? As if they know what to do with that.
We hear them all the time. And sometimes the words flow out of our mouth. You make me feel angry. Look at what you're doing. How could you give me these gray hairs? I mean, anything like that, right? We're back into blame consciousness. Mm-hmm. And we're really modeling for our children that other people have the power and control over my emotional realm. I don't. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And embedded in that, not only is the lie that other people make me feel, no, people are a catalyst that give rise to a response within me. And so we acknowledge the fact that if this event hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been catalyzed into the experience I'm having internally right now. But if you have 100 people in a room and the same event happens, there'll be 100 different experiences of it. So it can't possibly correlate that this thing made me feel, because how could all of us have different feelings about it? If it was the cause of the feeling, we'd all have the same wave of feeling, and we won't, because all of us will be telling ourselves a different story about what we saw. And then we begin to understand it's the story that I tell myself that commands how I feel about this thing. There is actually that gap between something being the catalyst versus the cause. You can struggle with not wanting to blame someone and even say those words, I'm struggling not to blame you for this.
But that's emotional intelligence.
Experience I'm having.
But that's emotional intelligence.
It is. I mean, yeah. And it's modeling, I'm struggling not to want to blame you for this, but I know you can't cause my feelings. You can't cause my feelings. And so I can't lay this at your feet, but I'm having feelings, man. They're everywhere. I'm having a lot of feeling right now. And just as you begin to language it that way, wow, I mean, you've created so many distinctions for this child. I made a mess. I'm not a mess. That is huge.
It really is.
So just the way you language that one thing, the child themselves begins to understand the difference between the names they call themselves and what they allow other people and the names other people call them, so that they can become assertive in order to not allow other people to call them names, and be able to make distinctions that many adults around them won't be able to make. And these might seem like little things. They're not. These are massive distinctions that support people with beginning to get a sense of, oh, okay. I mean, and it's huge. I remember my daughter, and she'd have like all these, of her little girlfriends over, and we'd be sitting in the kitchen, and my own daughter was working through this idea that other people didn't make her feel. And she, and I can remember just sitting around the table, and everybody was really chewing on this, like all of her little friends, and we'd be talking about this whole idea of, really, other people don't make me feel like. That's how lost people are, including myself. At one time in my life, I had no idea that I wasn't just always in reaction to what was happening in my outer world or my inner world, right? Whatever was being stimulated. Like there had just been no context for me to grow up understanding there was a connection between the inner and the outer, but I didn't know what it was. Nobody in my world ever made a distinction. I was raised in the land of there being, I would just say, emotional blackmail.
So speaking to like the transition between, the little kids, this true statement, true thought. Every time I see somebody on, they're announcing their first child and their new baby, and they're like, oh, I could not love something so much in my life. And I'm like, just wait till they're teenagers. Okay, literally, unsugarcoated, just wait. Because I love my kids, but Catherine, sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
I'm thankful I can say I've actually done a good job of, I became the mother I wish I would have had. No, not to be mean, but I wish I had. And by no means am I a perfect mother, but I am definitely, there for my kids and always will be in a different way. But, it can be very stressful. It can be very stressful when they are exhibiting these, these actions and behaviors that you're trying to let them, but, it still is a challenge, right? You're still trying to teach them. You're trying to give them, because this is one thing I've noticed, or I'm sure, you've heard, where like, for example, me, the reason I had such a hustle and such a drive in life was because of the situation that I went through, right? I had no choice. I didn't have anyone picking up after me. I didn't have anyone to come and save my day. I had to be my own hero. And when you have children that are brought up in a completely different environment, because of course that was my goal, for my kids to not have to go through that, then they have a different experience. Their references are different. Their experiences are different. And so in trying to be an emotionally intelligent parent, when I hit those moments of intensity, what advice do you have for parents who feel overwhelmed and are unsure about how to practice that in probably what are some of the most critical moments of their life?
I guess the first thing that pops into my head is that For starters, let's just create an ecosystem. I love your forest example. So let's extend the example. So if we create an ecosystem, then the ecosystem itself gives rise to a certain type of environment that will either grow this tree or that tree, or the tree will die. Okay. So I was working with a family, and right now they're struggling because the 16-year-old is moved out drinking too much, all these different behaviors that are risky and dangerous and really worrying. And when we were talking the other day, this boy and I said something about, well, what's your dream? What is it that just lights you up? And he said, well, yeah, I really like to be in the NBA. And I was like, phenomenal. Yay. Well, there are actually, schools where you could literally do your craft, and there would be an opportunity for you to see if you could actually make it. And he said, well, I don't know, because I'm not sure that I could stop drinking and smoking. I said, how come? He said, because I've tried and I wasn't able to. I said, oh, okay. Well, did you create the ecosystem around you to support that actually working? And he was like, what are you even talking about? And I said, well, in certain ecosystems, for example, like AA or NA, you actually have a community that supports you when it gets tough.
Right.
And you've got somebody who's standing for you.
Right. A sponsor.
When you have trouble standing for yourself. And he just looked at me and he said, yeah, no, I never tried that way. And I said, well, that way is going to help you more than doing it all by yourself. If you create that ecosystem around you, then you have a better chance at adopting the habits and the behaviors that are going to lead you to a successful outcome.
Totally
so the
agree.
ecosystem is what? It's transparency. It's, I love you, warts and all. It's, there's no behavior you can't come and tell me about that we can't talk about. It's that kind of open, honest communication. And that is the environment or the ecosystem, I believe. If you do the land of rewards and punishments, then that transparency won't exist. Parents don't want to create atmospheres where people can't tell them the truth. Of course not. However, without knowing it, that's exactly what they've done.
Right. Well, but I think that too, to add to that, it's, look, a child can still, I know with all my kids, I'm like, I really want you to know you can come to me, right? But they'll still hide things or do things. But you know what? So did I as a kid. I feel like when our kids do make a mistake, it's so hard for a lot of adults to remember, I was a kid once too. And maybe I didn't always make the best decisions. But like you said, when you create that ecosystem where there is a family that's unconditionally loving and supportive to them, it is a gift. And I remember one time, I heard one time somebody say, I didn't have a role model growing up. And I think that a lot of people don't recognize we do, it may not always be good role models, but at the end of the day, our parents are our first set of role models. If I had have had a supportive family, these things would not have happened to me. And in their desire to teach me a lesson, it just further propelled me into very dark places before I finally found my footing and figured it out, But then, and then later on, that when people wonder why those children with trauma grow up and then they're very independent and they don't need validation from any other person, like that can be a good thing. But then, do you have people missing out on relationships later on wondering why? And I think that's a very big reason why you'll have many people like myself that don't have relationships with their parents when they grow up.
Yeah.
For that very reason, right?
Yeah. I remember running a workshop. I had a group of men and we were going around the table, and the way I used to run the training was I had mostly women who would attend my in-person trainings in Hong Kong for like decades. And at the end of every 8-week cycle, I would run a, what was it called? Dinner and a show. And we'd book it at the club, and there'd be the dads. And I would know that half the dads in the room were forced to be there. Like their wives would say, it's the end of this thing, and I want you to go figure out like what I just learned for 8 weeks and blah, blah, blah. And so they'd come into the room, and a lot of them were like this,
Body language saying it all, right?
Yeah, right. I can't believe my wife made me be here. There was like a moment we go around the room and, tell me about, something that's on your mind with relationship to your kids and a problem that you'd really like to see shift. And how were you raised and so forth and so on. And some guy said, well, my parents hit me and I'm fine, almost like a justification for why it's okay to hit children. And as we went around the room, we got to another man and he said, my parents hit me too, and I'm not fine. Mm. And he opened up the room for truth and vulnerability.
Right.
And he said, I'm not fine. I struggle with it every day. Mm. And I struggle with our relationship and acting like everything's okay when it's not. And what they did was not okay.
Right.
What they did was not okay. And so we can just move on, white knuckle it, justify appalling child abuse as well. We have to be responsible and we have to, do what
teach
is
consequences.
Needed for our boys to be boys and, for girls to behave. And I remember, you asked what was my parenting like. I have vivid memory of my dad pulling the station wagon over and dragging my sister and I out, who were in the back seat, just arguing like crazy and spanking us, and I just think, oh my God, he was out of control.
Right.
He was out of control. Yeah. He needed to learn how to manage his own emotions.
Right. And you probably didn't end up in an abusive relationship, but many young women and men who actually experience that type of behavior, they grow up and that's just what families do. That's love. Right. That's love.
Yes.
That's not love.
Yes.
That's not
love. And that's so dangerous. Yeah. Oh my God. It's so dangerous. And that transgenerational trauma. And, if you don't want your kids to be drinking and you don't want them to be out partying, then what are you doing at home?
Right.
If you don't want them to be smoking, what are you doing at home? If you want them to value kindness and consideration, what are you doing at home? I mean, it's just the values. Like, what are we living and what are our children seeing as their examples? And when we see things in their own behavior, a conscious parent can start by saying, is there something here that's being reflected back to me?
Right.
That I get to look at within myself and what I'm modeling for my children before we start to work on them.
Right. Ultimately, the emotional intelligence and the conscious parenting, it is a form of problem solving in such a different way. It is that conflict resolution of recognizing, I know you as my child did not get up today with the intentions of making, life difficult, but that's just and their perspective is so limited, right? That's like, they don't often understand, but to identify it and address it and approach it in a solution oriented way, it generally makes such a difference, I think. And I think that a lot of people right now, statistics are underselling, like, if you don't raise your kids with difficulty and challenges, then a generation or two, your family will be in chaos and nobody will have, hardworking ethics and things like that.
You've caused me to start really sort of like chewing on this idea that if I am not bathed in some sort of difficult and challenging home front, does that mean that I'll lack motivation?
Right.
Because I guess that's what you're getting to. Yeah. The grist for the mill for motivation comes from hardship.
Right.
So what I would say is, if you've experienced the hardship, you will have more profound unmet needs. And the motivation for all of human behavior is to meet our needs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So are you raised in a family where so many of your needs are met that there are no unmet needs, and therefore will I lack motivation? If you look at Maslow would say, actually, it's not until your underlying needs are met that the need for self-actualization can even arise.
Exactly.
So I go to, well, no, I think that, we're just spitballing here. I don't know the answer to this, but as you and I chew on it, I think to myself, well, I wonder if what might happen is that we would have a generation of children whose needs for safety, psychological safety, emotional safety, belonging, acceptance are so met and that they have the skills for being able to articulate and feel into the distinctions between like my sense of something versus yours when you're projecting on me, knowing how to clarify all of that.
Right.
They're so emotionally unbaggaged with other people's projections that they actually have the freedom to begin to allow this part of themselves that naturally and normally would emerge if more people's underlying needs were met, just using Maslow's hierarchy, that there would be more and more people who are self-actualized.
That's, I mean, no, you're so spot on. Because it wasn't until my needs were met that I worked, don't get me wrong, and there was a lot that I did and accomplished, but it was from that need. But boy, when my evolution became my revolution. You're amazing, Catherine. I'm going to spend 2 minutes to just do some fun rapid fire questions, and we're going to wrap it up and get out of here. But you are amazing. So first off, if you could have a superpower, what would it be and why?
These are superpower. What would it be and why? Superpower. What would it be and why? Being able to see everyone beautiful.
Oh, I love that.
Consistently see past the tragic expression of their unmet needs.
Aww,
consistently see past my reactivity and be able to see to the core of the human being and the heart that's there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Do you have any guilty pleasure TV shows or movies?
I binge. I definitely binge. And I watch some goodies and oldies. Like I'm currently binging on How to Get Away with Murder, or whatever that show's called.
Oh, how funny. Okay, I'm gonna have to check it out.
Oh my God.
What was the last book you could just not put down?
Well, I guess this is the one that I go back to. It's a little bit of the Bible for me. And it is The Drama of the Gifted Child. The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. I just go back to that book. I have it right here. It's just like one of those that I dip into it. She was so clear.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Well, we are almost out of time, so I have to close out. But oh my goodness, Catherine, you're amazing. Where can people stay connected to you?
Well, go to freeparentingbook.com and you can download my book, 7 Strategies to Keep Your Relationship with Your Kids from Hitting the Boiling Point.
Mm-hmm.
And at freeparentingbook.com, it'll link you into my entire ecosystem.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate
this has been so fun. Loved our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And to you at home, as we come to the end of our interview with Catherine, we are left with a sense of hope and possibility. Catherine has shown us that by cultivating emotional intelligence in ourselves and in our children, we have the power to transform our lives and our world. We have learned that parenting is not just about raising happy, well-adjusted kids, but about building a better future for everyone. It's about teaching our children to be kind, compassionate, and empathetic, and to see the humanity in all people. So as we go on about our day-to-day lives, let us remember the lessons we have learned from Catherine, and let us strive to be better parents, the best educators, and the best human beings we can be. Let us be guided by the principles of emotional intelligence and use them to create a world that is more equitable and more compassionate for all. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing your wisdom and your insights with us today. She has inspired me to be the change I want to see in the world, and for that, we're truly grateful. And to everyone at home, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to comment, like, and share. Go to our website, www.unsugarcoatedmedia.com. Sign up for our newsletter so you can be in the know. And of course, as always, thank you for letting us be unsugarcoated. Take care.